The cabin lights flickered softly as the hum of the engines filled the silence of the late-night flight, and row 9 was quiet except for the faint rustle of a woman's jacket as she pulled it tighter around her shoulders. She had boarded the plane like any ordinary passenger, carrying nothing more than a small backpack and a ticket, her eyes avoiding everyone's gaze, as though she preferred to disappear into the background. To most who passed her, she was just another face among hundreds, an unremarkable traveler on an overnight journey. But destiny has a way of finding people when they least expect it, and for her, that moment began somewhere between the thin air and the dark sky at 30,000 feet. The plane was halfway over the ocean, the moonlight brushing the wings with silver, when an unusual stillness settled over the passengers. The flight attendants' smiles seemed just a little tighter, their steps a little quicker, as though they had heard something the rest of the cabin hadn't. In row 9, she felt it before she knew it, the way the air changes when danger draws close, the way your heart begins to whisper before your mind can understand. She remembered the training, the hours of discipline she had buried deep within her past, the life she had sworn to leave behind. Years ago, she had been given a code name, a life lived in shadows and silence. And then she walked away, convinced she could become anonymous, live as no one, just a quiet soul with no ties to the world she had abandoned. But as the captain's voice came over the intercom, strangely calm yet trembling underneath with urgency, she knew anonymity was about to be ripped from her. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking," he began, his words slow and measured. "We are experiencing a minor technical issue, but everything is under control." A lie. She heard it instantly. She had been trained to hear the weight between words, to notice the hesitation of a man holding more than he could reveal. She straightened in her seat, her fingers pressing against her knees, her senses sharpening. Moments later, a flight attendant approached, her face pale, her eyes darting nervously as she whispered something to a man in row 7. But then the attendant's gaze flickered to her, to the woman who had been invisible, and lingered there as if she had seen a ghost. She didn't move, didn't breathe, until she noticed the shadow of the captain stepping out from the cockpit, an unusual break in protocol. He walked down the aisle, his eyes scanning the cabin, and when they landed on her, the world seemed to pause. He leaned just close enough, his voice a hushed whisper meant for her alone, "Shadow Viper." The name cut through her like a blade of fire, dragging her back into the life she had buried. That code name was hers, one that no one here should have known. She felt the air catch in her lungs, the pounding of her heart drowning out the engine's hum. Around her, passengers shifted in their seats, unaware of the storm brewing between one man's whisper and one woman's silence. She looked up at him, searching his face, and he gave a faint nod, his voice low, "We need you." "They're here." Her mind reeled. "They're here." That could only mean one thing. The plane was not facing a technical issue. There were enemies aboard, men who had boarded under the guise of ordinary passengers, carrying a plan darker than the night outside. She glanced around quickly, her eyes sharp, cataloging details. The man who hadn't removed his jacket despite the warm cabin, the woman whose hands shook not from fear but from restraint, the two travelers who had exchanged no words but whose eyes met a fraction too long. She saw it now. The plane was a trap, and she was sitting in the middle of it. A cold calm washed over her as she inhaled deeply. The quiet woman in row 9 was gone. In her place rose Shadow Viper, the operative who had been trained for situations where seconds decided the fate of hundreds. The captain's whisper hadn't just pulled her back, it had resurrected her. And though she had sworn never to return to this life, the truth was unshakable. If she didn't act, no one would live to see morning. She leaned toward him, her voice so soft only he could hear. "Tell me where." His reply was curt, heavy with urgency. 3 in the cabin, 1 in the galley. They're waiting for a signal. She closed her eyes for the briefest second, steadying herself, the years of training flooding her veins like fire. Then, with a slight shift of her posture, she became what she had always been. Danger hidden beneath silence, strength masked by anonymity. The nobody in row 9 was gone, and the savior of Flight 327 had awakened. And so began the longest night of her life, as the fate of every soul aboard the aircraft rested not in the hands of the captain, nor the crew, but in the whispered rebirth of a woman who had once been nothing, until the world needed her code name once more.